at the end of the day, what an insurance plan is it's kind of this algorithm for processing claims and for assigning rights to people. If you can make that plan simple, you can easily underwrite it. You can easily explain it to people.
Hey, what's up, guys? Spencer Smith here, host of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast, sponsored by Yuzu Health, ClaimDoc, and PlanSite. Enjoy today's episode. Even your father gave you some guidance about United Health Group, which I read in your notes. Which is, did he come from the industry or
no? Okay. He didn't. He is just a curious guy that was always kind of talking about business. But I always thought it was curious that no one knew anything about United Health Group, and it was in Minnesota. And I had a lot of kind of family friends that worked there, and it was kind of just this weird company with a very generic logo, and everyone kind of thought of them as a commodity, but they were super valuable. Yeah. And so that was just fascinating to me. Like, where?
Do you remember how old you were when he was talking to you about UHC?
I was in early high school probably. So
that's an uncommon conversation between father and son. You know, at that age, right? You really need to pay attention to this company, right? Because of its valuation. And he's not wrong.
And he was like, it's the most famous Minnesota company, and I was and still am kind of a zealot for Minnesota, and so I was like, wow, I must be proud of this company. But then kind of as I learned more about the industry, I realized that there's actually the fact that it's so obscure is I think hurting kind of the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's fascinating. Like, no one even knows. Like, I ask people in the industry, like, who founded United Health Group when? And like they're off by like 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even venture a guess, right? So do you have that stat?
Yeah, it's like Richard Burke in 1977.
Okay.
And it was basically just he kind of understood the network model, which was kind of new at the time, and kind of the fact that if you could negotiate with physicians, you could kind of have the best network at the lowest costs. And he just consolidated power by kind of trying to get as many physicians under contract and acquire other health plans as he went. Okay. And so it was just a total acquisition negotiation kind of.
Well, and I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, right? Because I want to go ahead and start I want to go down that path ultimately because as we talk about the origins structure of a network and maybe what it is today in 2024 and what it should be or what it's converting to, I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. But I assume we're rolling, right, Nathaniel? Yeah, so we're rolling. So we're going to go. I like doing that too, so catch you off guard almost that we're filming. So how do you even say I didn't even ask your last name. How do you say? Is it Pekala?
So my dad says Pekala.
Pekala,
I say Pekala.
Pekala.
Or so it changes based on kind of whoever is saying it.
Well, you're the second person that sat down with me that has like infighting within their family of how to actually pronounce their last name. So I'll call you Pekala. So Russell Pekala, you're the co-founder of Yuzu Health. How are you, man?
I'm good. It's good to be in Texas. It was a long journey.
Yeah.
But first time in Dallas, so super excited, except it's cold. Didn't expect that.
Super cold. As cold as Minnesota, you probably are talking about.
It's cold as average in Minnesota.
So a couple things are happening here. First podcast ever, right?
Yeah, first podcast ever.
But appreciate you being a listener. Second, can you briefly summarize the travails of getting down here from New York? It was a pretty crazy travel trip for you.
Yeah, so there was a storm yesterday in New York, and I was scheduled to leave at 11:30. Ended up kind of having that flight canceled. So I was rebooked to a flight that had a connection. I could have been booked to kind of a direct flight later, but I wanted to get in as soon as possible yesterday. Turns out that would backfire. So ended up getting onto this connecting flight through Richmond. The second leg of that journey left before my first flight came in. And so I was kind of stranded in Richmond, and there were no flights until late this morning. And so I booked a new flight on a different airline and ended up kind of going through Atlanta. But then the through Atlanta flight was again canceled, rebooked for this morning. And so they put me up in a hotel. I had like 4 hours between kind of when they decided to cancel the flight and when the next flight was scheduled to take off.
But you didn't sleep, right? Or
I didn't sleep until getting on the 7 a.m. flight this morning.
Okay. Well, so I mean, that's I've had a couple people hit some snafus, but I think that's probably takes the cake, man. Because I mean, the lack of sleep, I'm sure, is hopefully it'll catch up to you later today as you're flying. Are you flying back tonight, or are you?
No.
Okay, so
in
maybe
Texas for a few few days.
Okay, good. So you get some sleep, man. And I know how much that can be a burden on the mind, but thanks so much for the effort to getting down here. And I hope this podcast goes really well for you, and I think it will. And I think it'd be pretty interesting to cover the story of Yuzu, because you guys are this emerging kind of cool tech. I mean, you should consider yourself a TPA, right?
We are a TPA.
Okay, yeah. And we're going to unpack all of that here in a second. But I think, Russell, you have a pretty interesting background. We were just touching on, you took the first actuarial exam when you were in high school, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So how'd that come about?
So I grew up in Minneapolis, and it's the home of the health plan, home of United Healthcare, and a lot of other kind of stop-loss insurance carriers and people that work in the insurance industry broadly. And so when math kids are growing up in high school there, they push them towards kind of becoming an actuary instead of becoming like an engineer or something. And so I was kind of aware of the field very early and decided to just self-study for kind of the first test, which was like pure math.
Were you 16, 17?
I was a senior, so I was 17 or 18.
17 or 18. Okay, yeah. So you decided on your own just to take the first actuarial exam.
It's cool. It's like you just bought this giant book. It felt like studying for the SATs, but harder. And so I liked that challenge.
But you passed.
I passed the first one, and so then I failed the second one. The second one was like financial markets. I decided I wasn't that interested in it. Didn't study too much, but yeah.
You said the first one was probability, right?
Probability.
It was really in your wheelhouse. So once you got in the financial markets, maybe lost interest. I don't think it was probably a lack of ability. You just said, I don't really have the same.
It was senior spring high school.
Yeah.
I was like, I was cruising.
Stuff's going on. So then you end up going to Harvard, right?
Yeah.
Studying mathematics at Harvard?
Studying math, yeah.
Was there an area of specialty within mathematics? Because if you go to Harvard studying math, I don't think you just do addition and subtraction, right? So
I got really interested in kind of a subfield of math called computational complexity.
Okay.
So it's kind of the study of questions that can be answerable by algorithms and the efficiency of those algorithms that would answer those questions. It's really interesting because there are some mathematical processes that are very easy to kind of compute in one direction, but not in the other direction. And so one example of this is like multiplication. It's very easy to multiply two numbers, like with an algorithm. It takes a very small number of steps, but going backwards and like factoring that number is very difficult.
Okay.
And that's kind of the basis of most encryption algorithms. So the fact that like something can be done one way and not the reverse is used in cryptography and has many other applications. So I just thought that was super, super interesting, and studying kind of like how do you define what hard means computationally.
But did you have a sort of a sentiment that you would find yourself in this field using mathematics or applying mathematics, or no at this time? When you were studying in Harvard,
for like insurance.
Yeah.
I think so. I did also take kind of some statistics courses and stuff like that, and really liked those courses. I just kind of I exhausted them by the end of like sophomore year. But I think I've always loved within math. Kind of it has this obsession with simplicity, and I think I'm definitely a mathematical thinker and not like an engineer, because I think I always want to kind of understand exactly how a system is set up, and I want it to be set up in the most simple and elegant possible way. Whereas I think an engineer is more focused on kind of getting something to work and kind of has a tinkering mindset where they might not need to understand it. They just need to kind of be able to kind of control it. I definitely want to understand things, and I think that that's very relevant in insurance plan design, because I think at the end of the day, what an insurance plan is it's kind of this algorithm for processing claims and for assigning rights to people. And I think so much can be kind of added to that complexity, but at the end of the day, if you can make that plan simple, you can easily underwrite it, you can easily explain it to people. And so I try to explain, or I think I still think in that mindset.
Well, that makes sense. I often describe, especially, I have an interest in stop-loss insurance, that there's a combination of math and an art form there, right? And I do love that mathematics will give you a binary outcome. Is it right or is it wrong? With stop-loss insurance and self-funding, though, there is an artistic or a creative or a subjective element to it as well, that there isn't exactly, let's say, as an example, there's not exactly the right spec deductible, right? You might say, based on the evidence or based on my risk profile, I should probably choose this one, but that doesn't mean it's right? And so you have to use that evidence to come to a best guess, but ultimately there is not a black and white right or wrong answer in that realm. And so I love, and I'm kind of split. You mentioned SATs earlier, the exact same score in verbal and mathematics. So I'm just like split 50-50 down the middle. So this is a natural space for me to be in. That's why I like to talk about stop loss insurance too. Pareto Health is the manager of the largest employee benefits group captive in the United States. And it's also now the main sponsor of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. I chose to partner with Pareto Health for 3 main reasons. Number 1, their dedication to improving the world of health benefits. Number 2, their mission to reduce volatility and to make self-funding simple for mid-sized employers. And number 3, the strength and scale of their program. With over 2,300 member groups and more than $1 billion of stop-loss premium under management, Pareto Health is the most robust solution of its kind in the country, period. Stay tuned for more information because I'm sure I'll be featuring them on an episode of the podcast very soon. Visit Pareto Health at paretohealth.com or follow them on LinkedIn to stay up to date on the latest news and developments. But anyways, enough about me, man. So ultimately, when you graduated, what did you do, or where did you find yourself in the real world? Yeah, so I had a few experiences in college that kind of intertwined me with kind of the kind of startup technology and software space that and one of them was actually with my current co-founder. He and I ran a dating app in college.
A dating app?
Yeah,
okay.
Called Data Match.
Okay.
It had been around for like many years before us, but it was just at Harvard, and we expanded it to like 15 other colleges, got 50,000 members. It's still at about 15 colleges and kind of runs annually. But it was a lot of work because we basically set up a web app, kind of, had to get leaders at other colleges to like participate and distribute kind of our questionnaire, and then kind of arrange sponsorships between kind of matches. It was a kind of once a year Valentine's Day only matching app.
Okay, that's what I say. So what's the spin? So one time only Valentine's and data match. So like
it's called Data Match.
So was there certain criteria or mathematical criteria you were matching? Like what?
Technically, but I'm not allowed to talk about it.
Okay, I get it. Probably sworn to secrecy, so we won't reveal that. But that's an interesting place to start. Did you fancy maybe you guys would have been the next Facebook? Is what the thought process was there?
I think we analyzed the business and said this will never work as a business because it only works because it's once a year.
Yeah.
It binds you, right? And so I actually think there's kind of parallels in insurance because you can't have too many options. But so that got me interested in kind of this hack together like technology, distribute it yourself. There's no oversight. It's just you and what you guys want to do. And I just love that mindset. Yeah. And so then I had the opportunity of working for Josh Browder, who is just starting Do Not Pay, which is currently kind of an AI robot lawyer.
Okay.
And they have a lot of really cool products that help consumers understand their legal rights and apply them to kind of usually win settlement money or get out of tickets and stuff like that. They actually have a few products related to medical debt and kind of medical malpractice suits as well. Which
I was
is
really
to say,
I saw that in your notes, the Do Not Pay. I was thinking immediately, obviously, Marshall Allen and Never Pay the First Bill, right? But it applies obviously well outside just the medical bill world. So Do Not Pay, though, what was the idea behind it? Is if you find yourself in a situation where there might be a fine levied, it helps you navigate the legal process?
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
Exactly. So it's a subscription model, but it'll keep track of everything that you could possibly have legal rights to but not know about. So it'll scrape your email and tell you if you could be getting a refund on that flight that was delayed, relevant in my case.
Interesting.
It'll tell you if there's any class action suits for any companies that you're a customer of, and many other things. And so it's kind of this integrated suite of like just legal rights as a service, as a technology platform.
So maybe you obviously can't talk about all of them just in the interest of time, but there's a lot of kind of startups that are in your background.
Yeah.
So did you gravitate towards them, like you said, because there's sort of like an immediacy of impact and the ability to go to market really quickly? And
I think I just liked the people.
Or maybe the people.
It was just like I finally talked to someone that cared about what they were doing. and just wanted to get it done as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And that was willing to kind of work with me and let me do whatever I was capable of doing, and wanted me to do as much as I could possibly do, which was sweet.
Well, no, I mean, that's one of the beauties of startups, right? Is you never know if they're going to work, right? But ultimately, the ability to impact and influence a small company is much greater than the ability to do so for a long-established large company, right? There's a lot more red tape and bureaucracy. In the startup world, right, it's pretty cavalier. But with that comes, you've got to fail fast or figure out what doesn't work pretty quickly. And if you don't have some guidance or oversight or some guardrails put in place, you can go off track really quickly, right? And those things happen. But so, like, when did you ultimately decide to dedicate your vision on what you now, or what we call Yuzu now?
Yeah, so a few years kind of after that first startup experience, I'd worked for a few other startups, always as the first employee. And then I was doing that, kind of telling myself in the back of my head that someday I would have like kind of enough confidence to go out and really an idea and a feeling like I could make a difference in some industry to do it, to try to start my own company. And honestly took like many years to think this through. But I first got aware of kind of self-insurance and insurance generally when my brother was actually visiting me when I lived in San Francisco, and he spilled ramen noodles on his leg and ended up kind of having this nightmare kind of path through the insurance system, where he, this was during COVID, so he's unable to like bring me into offices with him. I wanted to kind of go and help him navigate it. He was a little younger than me, but kind of the first person he saw at the urgent care referred him to the hospital. They like took a look at and determined they needed to do a skin graft. And when the bills came in, it was $180,000 like charged.
How severe was this burn?
It was not severe. Like that's the thing.
So it wasn't even like what is third degree? What's the highest level? Is it third? Or first? I forget I
can't remember.
I don't know which way the order goes.
But they coded it as pretty severe, like second to highest severity. Yeah. And I saw the burn. It was like not that bad. He actually took over a day to go into the urgent care between when the burn happened and like when he went in. So he was like not in critical condition or anything. Jeez. And so I think it was just that there wasn't that much specialty work at these hospitals. And so they just kind of took a kid with good insurance and tried to do whatever they could. And so but I remember kind of trying to figure out, okay, is this United? Like what health plan are they on? And then when the bill came in, it was through like an ASO. And so I learned a little bit about, so the employer is the insurance and they're making the decision too. Yeah. And so I got really fascinated in that. And I said, who could have done something about this? Because this was just terrible.
So Yuzu did not exist at the time?
Yuzu did not exist. Okay. This was 2 years in advance.
2 years in advance.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did the $180,000 of bill charges, what did you guys get it down to?
So I think it ended up being like $44,000, and then the plan like basically covered it.
Okay.
So it was negotiated down to like 44.
PlanSight is a complete game changer in the world of insurance brokering. As a broker, you know how time-consuming and error-prone the traditional RFP process can be. But what if I told you there's a better way? PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP solution on the market made specifically for benefits agencies. It's like having a superpower that gets you an average of 8 to 10 hours back per employer renewal per year. And the best part? PlanSight supports all carriers, all funding types, and all group sizes for over 20 different benefits. If you're ready to make your RFP process faster, more efficient, and more profitable, it's time to call PlanSight. Visit plansight.com now to book a free demo and discover the future of insurance renewals.
Not to say your business is common, but it's very common for entrepreneurs in the healthcare space to have some story like that of some interaction with the healthcare system that was obviously unpleasant, became aware of the way the system worked, overcharged for something, and it's like, well, screw that. I'm going to go fix it, not only for myself, but for other people. And it sounds like you guys had a similar origin story. So when did it become more concrete that I'm going to put together a business around this?
So it was actually, shout out to my co-founder, Ryan, who had like been kind of thinking about like reminding me that we worked together well in the past and that we should start a company. And so I was very kind of hesitant to commit to it because I knew it was going to be all in once I did. And so we decided to do that kind of mid 2022. I had it was summertime. I was feeling like I was ready to kind of dive into this, had saved enough money. And I basically insisted we have to do something in healthcare. And he said, okay, I know nothing about healthcare. I was like, me neither. Yeah. And so we ended up kind of finding, through a mutual friend, Max, who's our CEO, who had been a previous like healthcare consultant and was somebody that I think can be on meetings back to back to back, unlike me, who gets totally overwhelmed. And so Max is just a super upbeat person, like totally gets the spirit and the hustle. And so it was kind of an immediate culture fit. And we all came together. Still didn't know what we wanted to do in healthcare. But once we kind of learned more about kind of how medical debt works, and we decided and tried to set up health insurance before we even had a well-defined business plan and realized how broken it was, we ended up saying, if we can, we actually thought at the time, this is dumb. We were like, we've got to be an insurance company. And so quickly did we learn after calling people and just like Googling online that there was this thing called a TPA, and that the TPA didn't have to have as much capital, and that it actually kind of could structure plans. We were very inspired by Sana Benefits, who had like a well-defined plan design, marketed themselves as insurance, and like had just a good brand and like really interesting kind of partners in place. And so we were like, wow, you can really customize things and still have a brand, still kind of like communicate directly to the employer and the member, but not have to raise as much money as like an Oscar did to become an insurance company.
So when did you and I talked a while ago, didn't we? Right? And I think you reached out to me out of the blue. Well, I don't even know how long ago that was at this point. But was it Yuzu even formed yet, or was it still a concept?
Yuzu was formed. So our original business plan was actually to become a health insurance plan for startups. So that's actually what we raised our seed round on. I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty. So it was never clear that was going to work.
Or?
That was in late 2022.
2022. Okay, right on.
Yeah. So like December 2022. And so we wanted to be kind of like Brex, which is a credit card for startups. Yeah, we wanted to do that for health insurance. So super turnkey, like maybe something similar to what a PEO is, like what something like JustWorks is. But we wanted it to be like, you're not just getting an Aetna card, you're getting a Yuzu card. And parts of the plan are super nice and tech friendly, and it's easy to understand. Like we were going to redesign kind of the front end experience for the member, for the employer, and not have just some kind of PEO wrapping together traditional networks and traditional plans. What we found was that the states we needed to distribute in, which were like New York and California, had pretty restrictive stop loss rules. And so we were kind of baffled for a while, kind of how are PEOs able to do this, because they're giving custom pricing to different groups. But I actually think that a lot of what PEOs are doing, at least in New York, is illegal. Like I literally like have looked into this. I've talked to lawyers. I've talked to regulators. I don't know if you've ever been in like email threads with regulators, but it's actually kind of interesting. They like sometimes will respond to you. And so, like I was actually emailing someone at CMS, and like he was like a deep state equivalent to me. His name was also Russell. And so like that's
your doppelganger.
Yeah. So, but what we figured out is it doesn't matter like and this is kind of like one of my dark takes on the industry after being in it. Like it almost doesn't matter what's legal and what's illegal. It kind of matters whether you can get your partners and like employers and everybody together to do it. And so we realized, there's just no way we could get a carrier partner to underwrite any kind of MUA or kind of VIBA structure around the individual startups being kind of custom plans. And so
what was it? And well, actually, before I forget, let's say where did the name Yuzu come from? Because I don't want to miss that. YUZU for those that are listening only. So Yuzu Health, what does that mean?
It's been pronounced Yazoo. It's been pronounced like Yuzu, like separate words. It's Yuzu, and it's a citrus that's native to East Asia, and it is the brainchild of Ryan, who does our kind of marketing and product work. and he's our chief product officer, codes a lot. But he thought of the name after like literally like 6 months of like staring off into space, like when we were in rooms, and like he's just like writing down words. And the name means something because in East Asian culture, in Korea specifically, when you're sick, like it's common to have like yuzu tea as like an herbal kind of remedy.
Okay.
And so it's just kind of a comforting symbol that I think aligns with kind of minimally treating, like not over treating things, right? In today's kind of profit driven healthcare world. So
not over treating, but even just like giving care almost proactively or triaging on the front end for the most cost effective but optimal outcomes, right? I know we'll talk about DPC in a little bit. That's part of your framework. I love the sentiment, but I always love to hear, how did you come up with this crazy name, right?
Yeah, so
it's cool. I've never heard Yuzu before. Which is awesome. And I do believe you should, when people get enroll in your plans, should get a box of tea. I just saying that from a marketing perspective. But so when you set about this, when you had this catalyst with your brother, you set about trying to fix what you saw as broken. Was there an overarching problem with the system itself that you thought you were going to solve? Was there a big issue?
I think the big issue was people don't understand what's covered and what's not and how much it costs. And this is like a very obvious issue. And there's been many approaches to solving this issue that I think are like totally not working.
Okay.
And so one approach is kind of the oldest approach is you had the concept of a network and you had some security that everything in network was going to be covered or covered with respect to the cost sharing that hopefully is like understandable on your plan document and like from your SBC. And so you could at least understand, okay, I'm likely to hit my deductible. This is going to be what this event would cost. And maybe you don't know if, it's going to be above or below your deductible, but you at least had some certainty of it will be covered.
Yep.
But I think like that model has actually kind of eroded as a lot of people, a lot of networks, like you don't know what the network is going to be billing for. So they might be billing for things that aren't covered. Even if you think you go in for a covered service, you might see a physician that's not affiliated with the network that bills as an out-of-network provider. So this is super common. So the network is kind of one way of solving that. I think regulators have kind of tried to solve this through like enforcing kind of advanced EOB requirements on plans. But as far as I can tell, that's not really working. And so like there's a lot of reasons that's not working. It's very hard to compute from the plan side, especially if you have a lot of partners involved in your plan. And so that's not working. I think like what I see as a kind of bridge to a solution is to go back to the original kind of indemnity style insurance, where insurance was there to pay for claims once you'd already incurred them, but you were a little bit more responsible for shopping around and understanding what services were available in your area and not relying on your insurance to tell you the price.
Well, that's it, and it's relevant that you say that. So obviously we're shooting now in 2024, but I just released an episode last week with David Contorno.
Yeah.
And we talked about that very subject, right? We turned it into a clip. Nathaniel cut a clip up about how, it's perverted. Insurance has been perverted to a degree where everybody assumes I hand over my card and that pays for everything, right? Whereas, as David was saying, and I've talked about too, insurance is meant for the unforeseen, catastrophic, or unpredictable risk for the most part, right? So I shouldn't be swiping a card to pay for my copay for my doctor. That insurance should exist in case I have a heart attack or a cancer. So we've moved it so far down the spectrum of covering literally everything. People talk about GLP-1s now and should it be covered? And it's like everything should be covered under insurance, and my insurance pays for it. No, you actually pay for it in the form of higher premiums year after year after year. And so we need to decouple those two things and get back to what insurance was originally designed to do, which is the unforeseen, unpredictable risk. At least in my opinion.
I totally agree with that. And
which is how you've structured your plan.
So many other people have said this in far better ways than me, so I won't even go into kind of agreeing with you because I just totally agree with you. I think one thing that is interesting that I'll just add to that is that insurance plans have like a provision called like assignment of benefits, which allows the provider to basically take your claim and then file it themselves and file it on your behalf and kind of get paid directly from you.
Okay.
Obviously, if the plan doesn't cover it, they can still bill the member. So it's not like a guarantee that they will see you for free. Obviously, like people get surprise bills thinking that they had put their insurance card down. But I think that is a provision that is pretty terrible and like should not exist. I think like if you could design a plan where the member had to kind of go and submit their own claims or had to go and do a little bit of work at the beginning, you could easily save a lot of money, and there would be many fewer people working kind of on the RCM side, on the like provider side, to try to figure out how to maximize kind of referral volumes and all these terrible things that like once you realize what they're doing, you realize that insurance plans really have to be structured differently so that providers can't treat your claim and your kind of path through the system like.
Well, you're at the mercy of that system, right? So like if you think about who patient, doctor, third-party payer over here. Third-party payer is negotiating with a doctor of what's going to be paid. Doctor's billing the third-party payer, the insurance company. And then based on whatever they've negotiated, eventually it trickles back down to you and they let you know what you pay or what you owe as a result of that. You have no insight into that agreement right there.
Entirely agree. I have a good, if you go to yuzu.health/blog, small plug, you'll see that I have like an article about exactly this, just how the old system, it would be billed to you to insurance money back to you. And the new model is like provider to insurance, exactly what you said. And it's, I think it has led to this situation where a lot of people don't understand the difference between a network, an insurance company, and a third-party administrator. And so just understanding those three things, and then there might even be like a broker or plan design layer as well. So there's kind of like 4 different players here. And people don't understand, members don't understand, employers don't understand. And it leads to, I think, a lot of friction. And it leads to this sense of people saying, I don't like my insurance. My insurance didn't pay for this. And really, maybe the item that they're complaining about was explicitly excluded by the plan designer in order to save money, or there was some prior auth step. And so it wasn't necessarily the insurance company, someone like Pareto, that's actually rejecting the claim. It would be just the person that intentionally designed that plan to be a different like style of incentive.
Absolutely, and I think into the members' credit, right? It's a convoluted system. It's a super convoluted system. So I don't blame them. I still find myself at the mercy sometimes of consuming healthcare and being pissed off about it, to be honest. But that's another story for another day. But one thing I want to establish first before I contextualize the rest of the conversation is let's define exactly what Yuzu Health does and is, right? We talked about you guys are a third-party administrator, but it's a little bit more than that. So give me the quick and dirty elevator pitch of Yuzu Health so that we can carry the conversation.
So we're a third-party administrator. We specialize in new plan designs. So plan designs that are not network plan designs. And so we have kind of 2 models that we really like. One of them is kind of a DPC focus plan, so direct primary care focus plan. Generally, these are designed by direct primary care physician groups that understand kind of their local area very well, already have relationships with employers, and they're able to basically say, look, instead of buying us as an additional benefit, you're able to buy us in like a comprehensive integrated plan. And so technically it would be, a HMO style plan where the physician, the direct primary care physician, which is matched to each member, gets kind of a choice of a few direct primary care physicians. They're able to get referrals directly from that physician into other aspects of kind of the broader insurance plan.
Right. So I was talking about kind of the framework of the plan, right? So you got the DPC element as well. I think there's a cash pay element.
Right? So many of these plans also kind of because they're RBP wraps, so they don't have a network behind the.
So reference-based pricing.
Reference-based pricing. I'm trying to stay away from that word or find a new word. I think the better word would be kind of. I haven't found it.
I think my buddy at Omar at ClaimDoc calls it like a non-network, or I think
all
bottom up. All access. There's a couple different verbiages.
But ClaimDoc is a very different type of reference-based pricing because they're after the fact reference-based pricing.
So you guys are trying to do it.
So we are trying to basically pre-adjudicate a lot of the claims. So give kind of the care navigators that are affiliated with. Either they'd be the physicians themselves, the primary care physicians, the direct primary care physicians, or kind of people at those offices that are tasked with helping with those referrals. We're giving them tools to pre-adjudicate and understand what does 150% of Medicare look like in your area. and here is a list of providers that take cash in your area. And so you can just kind of scan the list for someone that's medically appropriate, understand whether the cash amount that they charge for that service is within kind of what the RBP allowed amount would be in the plan document. And then if that's the case, they can give a member kind of a guaranteed, this will be covered. And covered here doesn't mean pre-deductible, because any specialty services are still subject to deductible in this plan. But it does mean that there's not going to be the balance bill, and there's not going to be the ugliness that comes with reference-based pricing. And so then the next challenge is, okay, so we said that specialist physician or that MRI center or whatever takes cash. What does that mean? It means that they don't need you to plop down your insurance card. Instead, you have to teach the member, go in there and either pay and be reimbursed later, or we're working with kind of some people that have the capability of issuing a virtual credit card or a credit card physically into
kind of a one-time use credit card. Or
exactly.
So they have a physical card that can be reloaded then, or
there's a few different ways of doing it. There is a virtual card possibility, but the partner that we currently work with has physical cards, and members oftentimes prefer that. And so they just go in, swipe the physical card. It's authorized up to the allowed amount. That swipe is the transaction, is the claim. And so there's not much work for the member to do after that. Sometimes we follow up and just see if there is an itemized bill, but usually that's not necessary because we've kind of pre-translated the pre-approved service into kind of.
And the physician accepting payment is essentially agreeing to the payment terms, right?
Yes, exactly. So the member just goes into that physician and says, I would not like to use my insurance. I'm going to use this card.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that works for scheduled stuff. So what happens in the emergency situations?
So
that's always a question.
Emergency room situations, thankfully this has not happened, but we've extensively looked into this. What's good about the No Surprises Act is that it does provide kind of provisions that protect startup like plans without a strong network at the same level of like network plans.
Okay.
And so there's the QPA process, which is inherently broken and super backlogged, but it does kind of provide the ability to use databases of kind of what other payers in that region are paying for those emergency claims and adjudicate your claims to be in alignment with that.
Okay.
And they have like an approved methodology for doing that. It's a little bit complicated, but there are several qualifying databases that you're allowed to use to basically explain. You're kind of writing a case for why what you ended up paying was a fair amount. And so we currently have as a policy with our stop loss carriers that we work with, any bill over $5,000 we get reviewed, and so we're trying to get better at this stuff, but we're still getting it reviewed by people. We have a few potential partners that kind of work hourly on those bills.
Yeah.
And so we try to do as much work as we can and then just say, can you double check this?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, the additional oversight's always
yeah, no, I think it's super welcome because there's a lot we don't know. But there's a lot that the industry just broadly doesn't know. Like it's a super complicated legal kind of situation.
Well, you said you spent a lot of time personally reading like legal documents and compliance. I mean, is this just your hobby outside of work? Or?
I think it became sort of an obsession when we were going down the route of trying to launch our own plan to startups, because I felt like we shouldn't have to pay a lawyer $500 an hour to like learn it. And so I got accustomed to actually like reading a lot of regulations. I sort of learned where to look for that stuff. So I've listened to like all of FIA's podcast. There's a few people in the industry that produce just exceptional content.
FIA Group is definitely
you
one
included.
Of those. Well, thank you, man. But FIA Group's outstanding.
Yeah. And so I just kind of dove through that first, but then kind of got accustomed to actually like reading legislation, reading statute, understanding how regulation works with statute, understanding how ERISA works with kind of like state laws and stuff like that. And so I have a little bit of a framework to go into any specific issue. but obviously we do still use consulting hours with FIA whenever we need to like answer something definitively. But usually like we come to them with like a pretty good game plan, and they just say, yeah, that's correct.
Well, it's always good to have just like an outside legal opinion to say yay or nay, or you're on the right track, or did you think about this? But so like from a brass tacks perspective, because I do want to have the audience be able to say, okay, is this applicable to me or not, right? I think there's a few geographies today that you guys are concentrated in. So let's talk about that. What states are you operating in?
So we can operate. We have licenses in like I think 15 states, TPA licenses. So we can operate and we can get other licenses quickly. What we like to do, we view our job. I'll just explain this again because I don't think I explained it super well. A TPA is a glorified accounting firm. That's all it is. Its job is to basically be the source of truth for every claim that's adjudicated. Basically, was it covered, at what amount, who paid what, and how much of that came out of this fund from the employer, how much of it has to go and be like filed as a stop loss claim. So that's our job. I think historically, a lot of TPAs have also run the network function. And so they've also had to have a really good sense of kind of a local area. And so it's been very important that you work with a TPA that has that sense of your local area. What we like to do is actually flip it a little bit. Say, let's go back to just being this glorified accounting firm. It's not just a glorified accounting firm, because we also run kind of member dashboards, a little bit of kind of tech-enabled navigation if there's a wrap network or something applicable. But we can kind of be that technology and accounting layer, and then we find partners that are really strong in their local geography. And so we can work with kind of physician groups in any geography, but like they have to be strong with the employers that they're serving, because we let them, and we worked with our stop loss carriers to kind of explain this plan design. We've let them be the prior authorization layer and be the utilization management and be that referral system. But they're also driving business, right? Because they have those employer relationships. And so we'll be kind of everything that wraps around that. We'll send you templates of kind of what to say at open enrollment. We'll send you templates of like what information to collect if you want to get stop loss quotes. So we kind of bundle in kind of some education about some preset things that you could choose for your plan that you want to launch, how the process is going to work, what costs are going to kind of come out to be if you choose various plan design options, and then we just let them go out and sell it. And we have super transparent pricing. And since we're not kind of a TPA that relies on networks, we're not stuck in that model of kind of getting overrides from various partners that might be plugged in. So we want to be super, super lightweight. We're not focused on any particular geography. Right now we have groups in Georgia, California, and Utah. So
Utah, big fan of Utah.
Yeah, Utah's great.
Last company was based out of there. So like from an employer perspective, like, is there a persona of employer that you're looking for? Is it a size segment? Is it a fully insured transition? Talk a little bit about those criteria there.
I think the employers that we want to go for are actually really smart employers. Like, I would just say employers that have thought about this. I think generally, what's funny is I think when you sell some things, some people, I've never sold anything besides this in my life, so I can't really say. But I think like the impression that I had going into sales is, okay, I'll have a better job when the customer is less educated, because I'll just be able to seem more impressive. But that's the opposite.
It's opposite.
It's absolutely the opposite. Yeah. So I think the more questions the employer asks, and just the deeper that they're willing to think about this and like have already thought about it, the more that they're able to just quickly buy into this mission. And so I think it's employers that have been thinking about healthcare costs. Maybe they've shopped around in the past. They don't like their traditional kind of network style plan. They don't understand how they're spending money. They might be interested in this concept of a direct primary care, relationship, or maybe they're comfortable kind of navigating the system themselves with kind of cash or something like that. And so they're looking for something new. But I would generally say it could be any employer that doesn't want a network plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a limitation on the bottom end though of like the size?
No, the size?
Yeah.
No, we have no limitations.
No limitations. Okay, yeah.
No
So
limitations.
So ultimately, and obviously, it's predicated
State
on
law.
the stop loss carrier being able to quote it, right?
Yeah, it's basically state law. We have relationships with stop loss carriers that are kind of bottom of the market in terms of like the size of group they can underwrite.
Okay.
But it's just kind of predicated on like what does that state allow in terms of like
Sure.
corridor or like group size.
Well, and I think what you're saying earlier about the sales process, I think the more that you can actually be the facilitator of the educational process itself, right?
Yeah.
The more trust that's created. It's one of the big emphases of Pareto, why I'm here, right? One of the reasons I was brought in is that the more that you can make them educated, they'll come to the conclusion ultimately that what you're offering is something that they need. But until they have seen the light or until they've been educated properly, and it's not, hey, we educate you so you'll choose this. It's like, if we educate you the right way, you will choose this naturally on your own volition, right? And that is truly, I think, an effective sales process is to follow that way. You have the ability to do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So they might have a little sentiment that, hey, something's broken, or I think there's a better way, or this DPC thing sounds good.
Yeah.
Let me show you why it's actually good, Mr. or Mrs. Employer. And then Yuzu comes in to save the day. We didn't talk about the pharmacy side, which I know is ultimately a big part of an overall plan spend. And some people estimate it's a third, if not closer to 40% of a typical plan spend. So what are you guys doing to help control pharmacy costs, especially specialty pharmacy costs?
Yeah, it's tough. I'd say that is something that we lean on our partner SmithRX to help us with. So they're an awesome, transparent PBM. They've been super great at working with small groups and being transparent with kind of those groups about kind of what the cost of all of their additional programs are, like the Connect program that they have. They have some international sourcing programs as well.
Yep.
And so honestly, they've just handled a lot of the tricky situations. We've had a few cases where people have been able to find good, cheaper drugs off of their formulary, and so that is important. But we also, like, SmithRX also allows us to exclude specialty for groups that want to exclude over a certain dollar amount. So the plan document basically just defines specialty to be above some dollar amount, and then SmithRX will help do the rest. And what's tricky there is that the member, you need to educate the member about kind of potential patient assistance programs, potentially have the employer set up an HRA or some other funding mechanism. But so far, it's been doable manually. And there are people far smarter that I call about this all the time. So we have some like advisors that have been in the TPA industry for like 20 years. And anytime one of these cases comes up, and quite a few have the last month, we call our advisors and try to figure out kind of how they would think about it.
Well, it's good to have guidance and experience.
That's something that I'd say we're very weak at.
Well, I think one of the things, though, that I think something to being intelligent is actually recognizing and acknowledging when you don't know something, and then leaning on somebody that has that instead of pretending that you can solve everything yourself. Right?
But I do think generally, like, the industry, like, I understand how all of this works from a legal point of view, which doesn't mean anything, right? Because I don't know like which websites to go to for like Canadian specialty pharma, and some people know that, and then they charge like an override, and like it's just like, share me the link. But anyway, I think like it's confusing, and I think it has been not talked about kind of quite like as honestly as it should be with employers. I think there's a lot of people that do these specialty carve-out programs, and they don't talk about the risks, and they don't talk about how it legally works. And their entire business model is subject to something that could change very quickly. And we've actually seen a lot of the patient assistance programs get a lot tougher, tougher in the last few months. And I don't have enough visibility to know if this is happening to everyone, but it seems like it's not this silver bullet anymore. And I think like the industry as a whole needs to talk about how hard of a problem this is, instead of talking about like one-off kind of carve-out solutions. But
it'll always be whack-a-mole, though. You know the game whack-a-mole where you pops up over here, solve this problem. Well, they just change and go over here, and you have to whack that one, and it's a continual process.
ClaimDoc is a medical claim auditing and member advocacy company. We provide fiduciary services to employer-sponsored benefit plans, and allowing them to create an environment where we ensure that the benefit plans are being charged on a fair and reasonable basis.
My business is basically people, and it become a real simple transition. We thought it was going to be far more complex. I've saved, we'll say, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I could not say enough about ClaimDoc.
But so I want to kind of flash forward to a degree, not all the way to the big picture yet, but maybe flash forward in the life cycle of Yuzu Health the next 3 to 5 years. What does success look like for you? What do you want to accomplish in that time frame?
Success for us looks like the ability for any highly performing kind of primary care level group to show their value to their employers and kind of gain a broader scope of services for the members that they serve them in a deeper way by designing plans for employers with them at the center. Okay. And so if we can make that kind of that plan style something that's normal for employers to do, something that members feel comfort with because they still have access to funding for specialty services through kind of cash pay options and like kind of pre-adjudicated RBP. If we can make that like a bundled, comprehensive plan that any high-performing group can set up, that would be incredibly successful. I think we are... we want to build the tools to really enable that, but I think like we're still learning a lot, and the industry is honestly changing very quickly. And so, like you said with the whack-a-mole thing, I think there likely will be new kind of plan design tweaks, but we've built kind of our own custom adjudication or custom integration logic, so we can very quickly kind of integrate with new partners, new engagement tools.
Well, what you're doing is that's a $1 trillion problem, right? Is try to take, unpack, decouple, whatever you want to call the current state of affairs, take all those pieces, reassemble them, put them back together and crystallize them in something that's usable, but also simple enough for the average member to consume and effectively consume, right? Which is a very difficult task. But I think all of the framework is there. It's simply putting it all together and make it cohesive enough that when I use it, I can understand it, right?
And the way I think about these DPC-focused plans too, just broader picture is, not only are they super understandable, right? Because there's not even claims being filed for the super easy stuff. And then everything else is kind of cash pay. So the member has that EOB experience, that advanced EOB experience. But it's kind of like bottoms up value-based care is how I think about it, because there's kind of this version in the Medicare Advantage space and the like ACO space of like top-down value-based care where there's a lot of risk scoring and trying to kind of figure out how to make a population seem sicker than it is or an intervention seem more effective than it is by just kind of like lying with kind of like B+ data scientists, right? And so like that's an effective way to make money. It's kind of gross. But I think this is actually like innovative because it's kind of bottoms up value-based care. It's starting with the easiest layer of value-based care and saying, let's not collect data on things we don't need to collect data on. Let's just make that care experience incredibly efficient because there's no bureaucracy. And there's just pure caring about that member and that employer broadly and their population. And so I see this as like a really, really cool kind of bottoms up kind of local first movement towards the end goal of just having providers deliver really high quality care and be somewhat accountable to that.
Well, I think that the proliferation of DPC over the next few years, obviously there'll be a corresponding probably growth with what you guys do as well, since that's a core component. I think it's being talked about so much. I highlighted it in a video last year of the top 5 things to focus on for 2024. People are talking about it at U-Powered Symposium in a couple of weeks. There's the industry at large is really seems to be vested in trying to help this segment grow. That requires physicians to be aware of it, that requires physicians to maybe convert their business models to it. But the more we have coverage geographically for brick and mortar style DPC, the better off I think the industry is going to be at large, right? But it's still in its infancy, it feels like a little bit.
It's totally in its infancy. But I think it's a movement that's going to stick around or at least exist in other forms and kind of that mindset is going to expand, because I think physicians are understandably very upset with the current system, and especially physicians that just want to get stuff done. Like physicians that aren't in it to just optimize kind of their billing codes or stuff like that. So,
but there's a quality of life for them. this overall, their daily experience of being a doctor could change dramatically if they convert to DPC. The administrative burden and all the stuff that comes along with filing the insurance claims can be eliminated. The patient experience is better. There's so many things that are improved with that model, but it's not as simple as I'm going to flip a switch and I've been fee for service for 20 years and now I'm going to convert my whole practice to DPC. So there's going to be a generational, I think, shift that direction. But in the interest of time, because we got 20 minutes left here, and I know we had the travel snafus, I want to make sure we land the plane effectively for today's episode. Could you define for me, though, real quick, if you could create a perfect plan, what would that look like in your mind? And how close do you feel like you guys are at Yuzu to doing that?
Yeah, I think this is a question that like keeps me up at night, like literally just trying to think about what is the perfect plan design. And I think like a lot of people would say, there's a few kind of common refrains that you hear, there is no perfect plan. Every employer is different. Or maybe like it shouldn't even be employer sponsored healthcare. And I actually disagree with both of those takes because I think like, I'll start with the second kind of point. I think it is natural that employers are kind of the provider of your healthcare. Healthcare is kind of treated in the tax system as compensation, and it effectively is. It's something that, improves your quality of life that everyone would buy. And I believe that, a lot of people say, okay, Blue Cross Blue Shield was the first health plan and it was just this tax loophole thing. But the truth is, if you look at what insurance is, and insurance and like healthcare are slightly different products that are kind of bundled together in today's world. But there was workers' compensation insurance for like 100 years before there was, Blue Cross Blue Shield. So it had been around a while, and it was always employer sponsored because it was based on your risk of work, like injury at the job. And so and as somebody that's like always worked for employers based on kind of my feeling of them having aligned values with me, I think I do trust them to kind of make benefits decisions, and you have to get around adverse selection.
I'm in agreement with you there. I said before you keep going, I think employer-sponsored health plans make sense. There's just a much better version of that than we have.
There totally is. So then going to kind of the question of like, what is the perfect plan design? A lot of people say, okay, every employer needs a super customized plan design. And my response to that is, almost every employer is on basically the same plan design right now. Like they're on a network style plan design where there's like assignment of benefits to physicians, where there's like the same benefit categories, the same Excel sheets, the same processes for getting like something pre-approved. It's almost indistinguishable.
Just different logos.
Yeah, it's just the big carriers are just almost indistinguishable. And part of me is like, is this regulation that forces the product to be a certain way, or is this the fact that there's just no other way to do it? We're in some sort of local maximum. But I think the current system based around networks just isn't going to solve for that transparency and that kind of price certainty. And so I think there will have to be kind of a shift. And I think it's likely that there could be some sort of uniform style product. And I think that if there was a uniform style product, it would be related to kind of being able to pre-adjudicate cash pay claims and have kind of almost an open source set of physicians. And so you wouldn't compete on network as a plan. You would compete more on your ability to engage members and to actually like bring them other services that work.
Well, and I think even just the effectiveness of outcomes itself, like the actual controlling of claims.
Controlling of claims.
Yeah, so I think that, I already know the answer to this question, right? But as we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, the origination of a network as an idea. 77, you said, or 70?
It was probably around a little before that, but that's when United started, and they like understood network
50 years ago, right? Either way. To where we have in 2024, I start to question the utility of a network as it was originated in today's world. I don't know how necessary they are anymore, but like, what's your sentiment around, is a network, mandatory anymore?
I don't think so. It varies actually by geography significantly. In cities, there's so many more cash pay providers. And then in rural areas, you have to have a logo. Which is just super interesting. And Texas is actually better than other states, so that might not be true here. It's more competitive. And you guys recently passed the cash pay law, right? Requiring physicians or requiring health plans to like accept cash pay claims as in.
I think the more that becomes the norm, the better, right? What will you accept if I pay you money today for this procedure?
Exactly.
Boom.
Exactly.
End of transaction, right?
And so, providers aren't getting the certainty of being paid anymore for kind of participating in networks. Members aren't getting the certainty of being able to be sure what the price is going to be. Predict the price. And so, we've even experienced, we've administered rental network plans before, and sometimes the physician doesn't accept the rental network. And that's, I think, something that's super new, like less than 10 years, like less than 5 years old, where kind of these rental networks, people are doing RBP behind the rental networks.
Yeah.
And that's just destroying the trust of these networks.
Yeah.
And so I think we're at the end of networks. And people are, I think, underestimating just how quickly this could fall if somebody does build a product that teaches a member how to use cash. And so I really hope that we get to that model.
Well, so that kind of answers my last question, which let's kind of close with this. Big picture of healthcare. I asked you to look forward at Yuzu's life cycle, but what about look forward in the healthcare industry in the United States? What does that look like to you in your mind? Where are we going to end up 5 or 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that the government does need to do, and they need to do it better, and then they need to leave everything else to the private sector. So there was a book I recently read just about insurance marketplace design, and basically what it argued, and what I agree with, is if you're gonna, as a government, require that emergency services always be provided, but not provide for a mechanism for paying for that, I think that creates incredible adverse incentives on plans to basically just not pay for that, or not provide easier access to things that the member is going to get no matter what. And now that I think there's been a lot of updates too in how medical debt is forced to be treated. And so providers that have a lot of medical debt outstanding are unable to collect on that debt. Penalties for not paying that debt are being erased. And so I think what that means is that, if there's no threat of debt, because the debt is not collectible, then no one wants to insure that debt. And so I actually think that one thing that the government really needs to do better is figure out how to pay for emergency services, which is tough because obviously the downstream stuff could impact how emergency services are, the prevalence of those.
If a provider knows they're going to get paid by the government as a reinsurer, then they're just going to charge more, or be incentivized perhaps to charge more because they know there's a backstop for it, right?
So I think the government has to figure that out better, and then I think the risk selection issue and kind of the customizability and underwriting requirements of level funded insurance plans and kind of small group plans has to just be thought about, because there are really innovative plans out there that want to compete on kind of their member experience, navigation, ability to care for members. And historically, just kind of investing more and more in underwriting has been a better investment over the last 5 to 10 years. And I think that that's a little bit of a shame. And I think there are already statutes at the state level that kind of try to prohibit that, but the government's not doing a good job in enforcing that. So I think we need to collectively come together as a country and decide kind of those trade-offs better. What can you underwrite on? And what is going to be, when the government requires that care be provided, it must also have a more thoughtful process of how it should be paid for. And it could be the private sector paying for it. So I do think the government needs to kind of straighten out a few things related to that. But I think the future of insurance will be more transparent. One thing that a startup that I worked for that I didn't talk about was in the data privacy compliance space, and it basically helps. It's called Transcend. They help companies give data rights to members, and I think the future of insurance is more members have access to all of their data about kind of not just their kind of insurance plan, but also their health data, kind of things they could do with that information, services they might need, and they will have the ability to kind of purchase products in the healthcare economy. And I say products instead of services, because I think right now the system is set up, physicians bill for services. Whether something can be performed by a physician or not depends on that specific person's licensure. But I think like the future of healthcare is more product oriented, where kind of the delivery of a whole experience will be regulated and bundled together and transparently priced. And members will have like more of a clear kind of shopping experience where they buy based on brand or product rather than thinking through what are the like specific services I need or devices I need or drugs I need to get to that same like bundled kind of product experience. So I want to like, I hope that the world works to evolve in that way. And there's a lot of kind of digital health kind of innovations that are trying to, and even kind of bundled surgery could be viewed as taking a bunch of complicated things, putting it in one bundle, letting the member kind of understand the brand of that practice or that, and not the specific services of one physician. And so I think hopefully that's a kind of a development that
well, and I think, and I wish we had more time because we could talk about wearables and predictive data, on an individualized level. I think that's going to be a big part of the future of healthcare as well. But unfortunately, we're out of time, and there's actually, I think people are about to knock on the door, so we got to get out of here. So Russell, it's clear you're a savant, man. And I appreciate somebody with your level of intelligence and the way you look at things, trying to tackle this problem. So I wish you nothing but success. I hope that we do 18, 24 months from now, do a follow-up version to get to State of the Union for Yuzu Health. But if anybody wants to get a hold of you, just look up YUZU Health on Google, LinkedIn. Russell, what did you say your last name again? How do you say
Pekala.
it? Pekala. I was going to say it the other way. So Russell Pekala, but I'll obviously tag you in all the posts, man. So wish you luck, man. And thanks so much for making your way down here.
Thank you, Spencer. I appreciate you making this all, making it easier to get into this industry. Quite honestly, I watched all of your videos as soon as I kind of learned what stop loss was, and just got super hooked on the idea of self-funding, partially because of you.
Well, dude, I'm glad you're here. I mean, that's a big part of the whole point is to attract, hopefully, very intelligent people to come solve this problem with us. So again, thanks again. We got to bounce, man, but it's been fun.